What makes you a gangster? Is it the flashy lifestyle, the thrill of illicit activities, or the power dynamics? As we dive into the murky waters of the past, let's rewind to the mid-19th century America. The year is 1850, and we're witnessing the birth of a phenomenon that would later shape the underbelly of society, the rise of the gangsters. These were no ordinary felons, but a breed of criminals who operated in highly structured organizations, engaging in sophisticated criminal techniques. Their professions could seem almost legitimate if it weren't for the fact that their lives were steeped in illegality. These gangsters profited from the darker sides of society, dabbling in activities that were often deemed immoral or outright illegal. Gambling, prostitution, and drug trafficking were their bread and butter. The allure of easy money, coupled with the thrill of living life on the edge, drew many into this dangerous dance with the law. But these gangsters didn't operate in isolation. They integrated themselves into the fabric of American cities, becoming an inextricable part of society. Their influence extended beyond the shadows, as they enjoyed lavish lifestyles and wielded significant political connections. The lines between the underworld and the upper echelons of society were often blurred, with both sides benefiting from this uneasy alliance. The life of a gangster was not for the faint-hearted. It was a life of high stakes, with the ever-present threat of violent gang warfare and the relentless pursuit by the law. Yet it was this very danger, this constant dance with death, that added to the allure of being a gangster. The thrill of living on the edge, the adrenaline rush of evading the law, and the intoxicating power that came with being a part of an organized crime syndicate were all part of the gangster's allure. So a gangster's life in the 1850s was a dangerous gamble, with high stakes and uncertain outcomes. Ever wondered why the 1920s are often called the Golden Age of Gangsters? Well, let's take a step back in time and find out. The 1920s, also known as the Prohibition era, was a period of significant change in the underworld. The government's decision to outlaw the production, sale, and transportation of alcohol created a booming black market. This presented an irresistible opportunity for gangsters, who quickly capitalized on the nation's insatiable thirst. They transformed from street thugs into sophisticated criminals, running intricate operations involving illegal distilleries, smuggling, and speakeasies. This transition wasn't smooth, however. The competition was fierce, leading to violent gang warfare. One of the most infamous instances was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, orchestrated by none other than Al Capone's gang. This brutal act of violence, where 7 members of Chicago's North Side gang were gunned down in broad daylight, shocked the nation and marked a turning point in public perception of gangsters. The 1920s also saw the rise of centralized criminal syndicates. Gangsters expanded their operations beyond alcohol, venturing into industries like gambling, prostitution, and drug trafficking. These criminal enterprises were highly structured, with a clear hierarchy and distribution of roles. This organization allowed them to generate substantial profits and live lavish lifestyles, further glamorizing the gangster image. However, this golden age wasn't just about violence and vice. Gangsters also had a significant political influence, with their deep roots in American cities going back to the 1850s. They leveraged their wealth and power to forge connections with politicians and law enforcement, ensuring their operations could continue unimpeded. Thus, the Prohibition era marked a high point in gangster history, with figures like Al Capone becoming household names. It was a time of innovation and expansion for organized crime, setting the stage for the evolution of gangster culture in the decades to come. As the 1930s rolled in, so did the need for a more organized approach to crime. The decade brought about a seismic shift in the world of gangsters. The era of reckless gunfire and chaotic gang warfare was gradually being replaced by a different strategy. A strategy that was more calculated, more organized, and paradoxically more peaceful. The 1930s saw the birth of a national organization, a sort of United Nations for the underworld, if you will. This organization was formed with the objective to regulate gang activities and reduce violent conflicts. No more Wild West, it was time for a more diplomatic approach to crime. This new organization brought about a significant evolution in gangster operations. Instead of each gang operating in its own silo, they now had a common platform, a sort of syndicate. This not only ensured that each gang could operate freely in its own territory, but it also prevented territorial disputes which often led to violence. The process was simple, yet effective. Each gang had a seat at the table. They would discuss, negotiate, and make decisions collectively. This ensured that the interests of all gangs were taken into account and no single gang could exert undue influence over the others. But don't mistake this for some sort of altruistic endeavor. The primary goal was still to maximize profit. The difference was that now, they were doing it in a more systematic and efficient manner. They operated in highly structured organizations, much like a corporation, engaging in various illegal activities like gambling, prostitution, and drug trafficking. The profits were substantial, and the risk was managed effectively. This shift in strategy also had an unintended consequence. The public perception of gangsters began to change. They were no longer seen as mere thugs, but as sophisticated criminals who knew how to navigate the complex world of organized crime. This was also the time when the lavish lifestyle of gangsters became more pronounced. They lived like kings, with their ill-gotten wealth allowing them to enjoy the finer things in life. They had political connections, and their influence extended far beyond the underworld. The 1930s showed us that even crime, when organized, can function like a well-oiled machine. The decade marked a turning point in the history of gangsters, setting the stage for the evolution of organized crime in the decades to come. Despite the spotlight of congressional investigations, gangster power persisted. It was during the mid-20th century when the government's spotlight was focused on exposing the underbelly of organized crime. Yet, despite the heat, the gangsters weathered the storm with an uncanny resilience. This resilience was not born out of luck or happenstance, but rather a complex web of connections, influences, and power. The mid-20th century was a time of tumultuous change in American society, yet in the midst of this change, the gangsters managed to maintain their positions of power. How did they manage this? One word: connections. In the world of organized crime, connections were everything. They provided protection, information, and most importantly, the ability to influence. To understand the resilience of the gangsters, it's crucial to understand the role of political connections in their survival. These weren't just casual acquaintances, but deep-rooted alliances that had been forged over years and even decades. They had their fingers in every pie, from local law enforcement to the highest echelons of political power. It was these connections that allowed the gangsters to evade the clutches of justice time and time again. But it wasn't just about survival. These connections also allowed them to thrive. They used their influence to expand their operations, infiltrating various industries and generating substantial profits. Despite the spotlight, they managed to turn the heat into an opportunity, showcasing their cunning and resourcefulness. Of course, this didn't mean that they were invincible. There were losses, betrayals, and moments of uncertainty, but through it all, the gangsters showed a remarkable ability to adapt and evolve. They were survivors, always finding a way to stay one step ahead of the law. In the face of adversity, the gangsters proved their mettle. They showcased a level of resilience and adaptability that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. They were more than just criminals. They were survivors, entrepreneurs, and, in their own twisted way, visionaries. Despite the investigations, gangsters found ways to survive and thrive, showcasing their deep-rooted influence. They were a testament to the power of connections, the importance of adaptability, and the enduring allure of the underworld. Every empire has its fall, and the gangster empire was no exception. As we journey into the late 20th century, we see a significant shift in the landscape of organized crime. This was a period marked by aggressive prosecutions, which sought to dismantle the power structures of traditional gangster syndicates. Organized crime had reached such a level of sophistication and influence that it began to attract the attention of law enforcement agencies and federal prosecutors. As the dragnet closed, many gangsters found themselves facing the full force of the law. In an era of increased surveillance and improved investigative techniques, gangsters were no longer invincible. These prosecutions were not the only challenge faced by the traditional gangster. There was a wave of defections within their ranks, with many choosing to turn state's evidence in exchange for leniency. This erosion of loyalty was a devastating blow to the gangster ethos, which had always placed a premium on solidarity and silence. But as the old guard fell, a new breed of criminal emerged. These weren't the suit-wearing, Tommy gun-toting gangsters of yore. Instead, they were more entrepreneurial, more flexible, and more global in their operations. Their crimes ranged from cybercrime to human trafficking, reflecting the changing times and technological advancements. Organized crime was evolving, adapting to new opportunities and challenges. The late 20th century was a time of transition, A time when the old ways of the gangster were replaced by new forms of organized crime. The allure of the gangster lifestyle, the power, the wealth, the infamy, remained, but the players and the rules of the game had changed. So, while the traditional gangster may have fallen, the evolution of organized crime continues to this day. The late 20th century may have seen the decline of the gangster, but it also saw the rise of a new criminal order, one that continues to shape our world in profound and often disturbing ways.